as I mentioned, we have Jim Cook here, who's with the Third Mutual Board. Well, Jim, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And for those folks who don't know who you are, tell me a little bit about yourself and how long you've been here.
We purchased 17 years ago. We were here for 5 years, then we're in Hawaii for 7.
Oh.
And then came back. We've been back 4 now.
All right. Well, hence the ensemble that you have today. We are looking at a very fun shirt, and I saw it. I went, man, he's got to be either from Florida or Hawaii because that looks great. Well, that is great, and and that perspective that you have, being here 17 years. We were talking a little bit about change and evolving, and there have been a lot of changes over the years, as you had mentioned. So being one of those things is the new resident orientation. So I announce those regularly, and it sounds like it's really just for new people, but it's not.
No, in fact, it's probably really good for people who have been here a long period of time to actually go to a new orientation, just to catch up on what's going on. Things evolve, rules change, nothing stays stagnant.
Right.
So to keep informed and to actually know what's going on. So many of the problems we have are with people not knowing the rules, and most of them don't want to break the rules,
right?
But they're just unaware.
Yeah.
And so if you go to a new member orientation, you can catch up on what's going on now.
So what generally is the protocol for the orientation? Like, how does it go? Is it very long, or how does it go?
It's generally scheduled for about 45 minutes. Sometimes it goes a little longer when people have questions. There's a person that's the official person for doing the orientations, but we also have a board member come there and have a perspective. There's kind of a script that we go through, but then can answer questions afterwards. Sometimes a director like myself will sit in the audience and be there to answer other questions, because every director doesn't know everything about everything.
Well, right, and you also have specific committees or, that would help with some of those things.
Yeah, and I'm the chairman of the ACSC committee, so for alterations, people have a lot of questions, especially the new people coming in. They want to remodel, they want to bring things up to date, and so I can answer a lot of those questions.
Oh, okay, great. So you did alterations yourself, I assume?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's good to know, because I think we've gone over it before, is when you have upgrades and things, certain things aren't covered, and insurances and things like that, so certainly a good person to know. So moving from a single-family home to a multi-family community, tell me what that is.
Well, basically, people who live in single-family homes that come to our community have to understand that they are giving up a lot of those rights that you have with your own home, your own property. And they need to learn to be tolerant of their neighbors, because again, you're in a multi-family environment. You're no longer just in your own little home in your own little world. And so you have all these different rules to follow. You also have responsibilities. And so many times what happens is people will look at their escrow documents, they'll initial all those little boxes, but we're always a little bit remiss, because after you've signed 20, 30 pages of papers, you aren't really reading everything, you're just initialing.
Yeah.
And people really should go back over their escrow documents and see what their responsibilities are.
Okay.
Because they have signed for that. They need to understand. And so oftentimes we have people come in and they'll start to put their own plants, things that aren't allowed.
Yeah.
And it's all in the documents.
Right.
You just gotta know. And most people don't want to break the rules, like I said.
Right.
They just are unaware because they either didn't pay attention or their realtor didn't inform them. And that's another thing we're trying to correct, is to do some education to the realtors. The realtors that have been here for a long, long time generally aren't the problem. It's somebody who comes in here and sells properties for the first time.
Oh, okay, yeah. And there, like you said, there are lots of different rules, and you just mentioned probably one of the main ones is planting. What are some of the other things that people might make a mistake doing, not knowing?
They might try and extend their patio with pavers, something like that, and extending it into the common area, which isn't allowed unless they get a variance.
Okay.
And even then, there's a lot of restrictions. We're restricted by our own rules and regulations that we have to follow, but we're also restricted by Davis Sterling.
Right.
And the statutes and things that the state of California places on us, we have to work around all those different things.
Okay.
So the problem is Sacramento will make a rule. They don't see what the long-lasting problem is. And we had quite a few rules that came in this January 1st that we're still trying to maneuver our way around to understand what our obligation is under those statutes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, the village is a unique operation. And so, of course, like you said, Sacramento might make some blanket thing and you have to work through whatever it is.
Yeah, and it's not just us, it's all multifamily type facilities.
Anyone who has an HOA. Now, interesting that you mentioned, board decisions are made following certain types of documents, and then you also mentioned Davis Sterling. So what is Davis Sterling, so folks who don't know?
Davis Sterling is basically the statutes from California that cover HOAs.
Okay.
And within that, we have a little bit of flexibility when it comes to common area, but we have to meet certain specific guidelines. Otherwise, if something's going to encroach onto common area, it takes a 67% vote of the community.
Right.
And that's another problem, that we can hardly ever get that vote because we have landlords that are not residents.
Oh, yeah.
And what happens with landlords that aren't residents, not all of them, but a large majority of them, especially with our monthly fees, they say, oh, well, I don't really care if the monthly fees go up, I'll just raise my rent. And so when you have that kind of problem going on, it makes it even more difficult to reach those percentages to actually change some of our CCNRs. And again, we're so restricted by our governing documents that it makes it difficult to make changes. And that's something people need to understand, that even more so in an HOA, you need to vote.
Yeah.
And only the people that can vote are the owners. The tenants don't get to vote.
Right.
So even if the tenants are concerned, it's their landlord that has to vote. So the tenants need to make their landlords understand if it's something that's going to try and keep the monthly down.
Right.
Because they should be aware that their landlord is just going to raise their rent.
Right, exactly. So it's very important for anyone who is renting to pay attention to what might change, because like you said, their rent could be raised. And I don't think they're going to want that. Now, coming from your perspective, being on a board, I think every board member has a feeling or something that they want to accomplish. However, you're there for the community. So what would you say to those people who are on the board and those who may want to serve on the board?
Well, one of the things that's hard for people to understand is that we as board members are responsible to the corporation. We're responsible to make sure that the place stays solvent. We don't want to change rules, do things to where we don't have the money. The other thing is that the members have to understand all the money to do all the maintenance, everything we do here comes out of their pockets.
Yeah.
That's our revenue source. And so when people come and say, well, we want you to do this, we want you to do that, well, you need to understand that's going to cause us to raise the monthly.
Right.
If you don't want the monthly raised, you need to understand we're trying to do more with less. We're trying to become more efficient. There are things that we do that may not pay off for years ahead, but if we don't plan ahead, it'll all come to a position where we'll have to raise the monthlies.
Right.
And we try not to raise them, but the cost of living, inflation, everything that's going on right now, it's very, very difficult. And so, again, we have to try and do more with less.
Yeah.
And our obligation as directors is to the corporation. We want to understand and try and help the members, but ultimately what a single issue item for one member may be, it isn't necessarily what's good for the community as a whole.
Right.
And our main goal is their fiduciary responsibility to keep Laguna Woods Village afloat.
So when someone has an issue and they want to bring it up to the board, what's the best way for them to do that?
Come to a board meeting during the member participation portion. They have 3 minutes to state their case.
Right.
We'll respond to that. Oftentimes, things can be handled right then by passing it on to one of the staff to follow through. Sometimes the requests obviously aren't going to be able to be taken care of.
Right.
And that's another thing is when people come in, they're a single issue item generally. And before, when I was a city councilman, you know, people would come to you 99 times and you did what they wanted to do, and for their attitude, that's what you were supposed to do. But the one time you vote no, then you're the worst elected official in the world. And that's what happens with single issue.
Sure.
You know, we don't deal with just single issues. We've got thousands of issues we're dealing with.
Yes.
And we're going to committee meetings, we're trying to solve things. In the ACSC, the alterations, I'm slowly trying to go through all of our standards and trying to bring them all up to date, try to make them timeless, so that you look at the standards that are today's standards, what the specifications are, not what was written almost 60 years ago.
Sure.
And our committee works hard on that. Staff is great. I have Bart Mejia that I work directly with, and we just go through things step by step by step. And we still have some bugs because when it gets to the full board, ultimately we are recommending, the full board is approving.
Right.
And something we may not have seen, other members on the board might see when we get to the final process.
Sure.
And that just happened this month.
Okay.
Where we had a standard for, let's see, what was it? Oh, for the air conditioning. And with that standard, there were a few other items because we want to put solar on the roofs. And so on the 3-story buildings, if you put the air conditioner compressor on the roof, it's in the way of the solar.
Oh.
And so we had to work out some compromises on how we wrote up that standard so that it could cover both aspects.
Oh, well, that's good. But see, that's working as a board, right? That's working together, which is exactly what you want.
And again, you know, we run by committee. So first the committee recommends to the board. The advantage of the ACSC is for variances, we can approve at our committee level. But if we deny the variance, then it can be appealed to the full board.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, a very good explanation. Thank you very much. And we'll see you again next time, I hope.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. If you want more information about any of the third meetings, when they are or what they're covering, you can always send an email to generalmanager@vmsinc.org, and it will be generated to the appropriate person. We'll be right back.